Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we convene our fourth of 5 programs on artificial intelligence policy. And today we're going to be exploring the very important ethical domain of how we build compassion into artificial intelligence. Before we do that, I want to just take a moment and pause in contemplation of what's going on in Gaza. And I would like to draw a thread about compassion and the lack of it in the following way. You may have all heard the news that Hamas, working with the United States, Qatar, and the Emirates, has proposed to the Israelis a ceasefire proposal and a negotiation deal around the hostages, etc. Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, summarily rejected it and said that Israel is going to move forward relentlessly until total victory has been achieved. And Secretary of State Blinken is scurrying around trying to put Humpty Dumpty back together again as the United States gives full support to Israel in both military aid and in blocking any meaningful ceasefire. Today, I want to draw some historical themes, both around understanding the insistence of the Israelis in committing genocide, and also the opportunities that Israel has missed in its own tradition. And I'd like to start, because time is limited, with the story of Abraham, the father of the Jews, in 1600 BC. Abraham's family came from Ur of the Chaldees, and that's at the source of the Tigris-Euphrates River at the northern end of the Persian Gulf in what is now Iraq. And then his family moved to Haran up the Euphrates River in what is still today in Haran. And while he was in Haran, Abraham had a visitation by the Spirit of God that told him to go to the land of Canaan, the land of Palestine. And there, the Lord would provide bounty for Abraham beyond his imagination, and that the seed of Abraham would be richly blessed. So in an act of faith, Abraham pulled up stakes, and with his flocks and his servants and his family, he went to Palestine. When he entered Palestine, he had a diplomacy of friendship, of generosity. His herds mingled with the herdsmen of the local inhabitants. Occasionally there was conflict. And whenever there was conflict, Abraham would meet with the suzerain of the other clan and offer them a deal that they couldn't refuse. The other partner would choose any land that he wanted, and Abraham would take the lesser portion. And so Abraham was accepted. He became fabulously wealthy. He was an elder of the cities in which he camped outside, and his seed was blessed. And in fact, it was his grandson, Jacob, that had that famous vision in the night where he ascended the ladder, Jacob's ladder, into the heavens, that he built the next morning, an altar of stones, and called it Bethel. Bet meaning house, El meaning God, the house of God. And that became a sacred spot for the house of Abraham. And then the sons of Jacob went into Egypt, as we all know, because famine stalked the land. And they dwelt in Egypt for the next 400 years, much of it under duress, culminating in slavery and servitude to the Egyptians to build their great temples, their pyramids, and their monuments. Around 1200 BC, Moses emerged. And as we all know from our Bible stories, Moses delivered the people of Israel from bondage in Egypt. They wandered in the deserts of the peninsula of Sinai for 40 years. And then it was time for them to return to Palestine. But when they returned to Palestine, they did not embrace the bounty and the compassionate diplomacy of Abraham. Because during their servitude, they had built up a toxicity of spirit so that when they entered Palestine under the leadership of a young warrior, Joshua, they proceeded to subdue the land through the instrumentality of genocide. If you read the book of Joshua, it recounts time after time, battle after battle, how Joshua led the people of Israel to kill every man, woman, and child, all the animals, poison the wells, and cut down the sacred trees. Totally synchronistically, he did it to Bethel, which had allied itself by then, 400 years after Abraham had grown into a city. It was one of the royal cities of the Palestinians. And they allied themselves with the neighboring town of Ai. And there was a great slaughter. 1,200 years later, Israel was finally expelled from Palestine by the Romans after being destroyed by the Assyrians in the 760s BC and taken captive by the Babylonians in the 530s BC, very tumultuous history, and finally their diaspora. 2,000 years later, 100 years ago, they began their great return and entered Palestine, entered Canaan for the third time. And they had a choice. And if you read the narratives in world Jewry in the 1920s and the 1930s, there was a debate. How do we re-enter Palestine? Do we follow Abraham? Do we follow Joshua? But because of the accumulation of toxicity that builds up in the collective consciousness of every oppressed people, the Israelites chose Joshua. It's interesting to speculate if they'd have chosen Abraham and had just melded into Palestine and taken their rightful place as neighbors, as traders, as doctors, as lawyers, as elders in a common cultural tradition in which Judaism and Christianity and Islam are all people of the book. They chose not to do that. And they came into Palestine with the singular intent of dispelling the Palestinians and seizing control of the land, just like Joshua. If you listen to Netanyahu, if you listen to his ministers, they all think they're Joshua. They all want to destroy Amalek, as Netanyahu has stated repeatedly. One of the opponents of Joshua, who along with the Amalekites was completely wiped out. Every man, woman, and child. So when you bear witness, when we all bear witness to what Israel is doing in Gaza and the ferociousness with which they're seeking to destroy that people, it's because of an archetypal formation that has been incubated in the collective psyche through the oppression that they have suffered. And virtually without exception, in history, the oppressed, when given the opportunity, become oppressors. There's very few exceptions. What happened in South Africa with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission is almost unique in history, where the elegance of spirit of a Nelson Mandela and a Desmond Tutu could take the venom of vengeance and retribution and punishment and transmute that because of the elegance of their spirit and their capacity to love their enemies, to diffuse it with the oppressors simply telling the truth and thereby catalyzing reconciliation. Gaza should be a testament to all of us of what happens when compassion is replaced by hatred and tolerance is replaced by ethnocentrism, and the ability to live in harmony is replaced by the frenzy of domination. Abraham, where is Abraham today? We desperately need the compassion, the elegance of Abraham. Thank you, everyone. Welcome to Humanity Rising as we deal with these issues as they emerge in world events. Now I'd like to welcome my good friend, Tom Eddington, who is the convener of this session, who you all know, and therefore needs no introduction. Tom, welcome.
Thank you, Jim. And as we were chatting before the broadcast today, there are times when my ability to build a bridge between your opening comments and the program is stretched and challenged. And I welcome the challenge that you've given me today. So thank you. Welcome, everyone. Delighted to have you here today for our fourth in the series on AI policy. As we heard on Monday, Michael Putz put forward that the AI that is created, that's being developed, we genuinely need to look at what is the developmental stage of the people doing the coding that are creating the AI. Where are they as human beings in their evolution? What is their academic background? What is their training? What is their level of personal development? Using Wilber's integral theory, the people creating artificial intelligence, what is the level of consciousness they're operating in? What is the level of their beingness as they're creating the coding? And then, as our guests yesterday shared, the data sets that AI is using, where is it drawing its information? What is the data set? What is the content that the large language models are using? And the fundamental question is for me, with the AI that's being created, what is the level of compassion? What is the level of intentionality in the people developing the artificial intelligence? How are they thinking about the technology that they're developing? And to Jim's opening comments, my desire, my hope is that they're using the spirit of Abraham in their development and not Joshua. And yet we look at social media and what social media has done over the last 20 years, we've gotten a pretty clear indication that the development of the social media platforms and the technology that supports them has the spirit of Joshua, not the spirit of Abraham. And so I'm delighted to be in this conversation today with our two panelists, Nicole Yelsey and Dan McCann. Nicole, Dan, I'd like to invite you into the conversation today. And let's pick up on some of the themes that Jim put forward for us by starting first with the question of what is compassion in AI? And Dan, Nicole, I'll invite the two of you to just start with how do you hold compassion? What does compassion mean for you? And what does compassion mean in the context of artificial intelligence?
I'm happy to go, unless Dan, you wanted to go first. So pleasure to be here, Nicole Yelsey. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about compassion as it relates to kindness. So I can chat more about what we've created with KindWorks.AI. But because we're blending AI and kindness, we've spent a lot of time defining what is kindness and compassion as being one of the ways to practice kindness. And so I think about empathy and compassion going very closely together as ways to practice kindness. And empathy being that ability to put yourself in the other person's shoes and truly take that time to understand and listen and get to know and have that point of view of the other person. And then compassion being a desire to help based on that feeling of empathy and understanding of the other person. And with compassionate AI, again, we can talk more about just thoughts on how humanity and AI go together as a whole. But with compassionate AI is able to mimic what people are able to do with compassion. So, it might be that helping and that being able to provide the help based on what someone needs in that moment and what's truly important to the person, where AI does not have the same ability as a human is that desire and that feeling. And I call it that gut that a human has, whereas AI is going to be mimicking and learning through intelligence, but not having that innate feeling that a human has.
Thank you. Dan?
Yeah, really well said, Nicole. Thank you for starting us off with that context. And hi, everyone. My name is Dan McCann, and I'm the CEO of Ryzio Institute, and I come from a media and tech background as well. So in a similar way to Nicole, the context that I'm coming from today is from a somatic psychotherapy, group therapy, and coaching lens, and really looking at what the best of technology can offer us and what the superhuman values and the components that only humans can really offer. And so I think the way that you worded that, Nicole, was really great. Um, in humans, compassion is deeply rooted in emotional and social intelligence. So that encompasses empathy, and it really is about having an active interest in other people's well-being. And one of the really fascinating things about the time that we're living in is that right now, all of us have the opportunity to shape the narrative on how we can build compassion into artificial intelligence. And, it's times of the past where movies like Her and others were so far-fetched. And now, um, to use a metaphor, I think the cat is out of the bag with OpenAI and the way that artificial intelligence is impacting our daily lives in almost every industry. And so really it's about now bringing together diverse perspectives from a broad swath of lived experiences as well as professional backgrounds, and using those diverse perspectives to build compassion into allowing AI to support us as much as possible. If we take the definitions just a little bit further, I think the key difference between human and AI compassion is the depth of the experience and the origin. And so I think, Nicole, you kind of touched on this notion that um, not many people, and certainly not myself, are arguing for AI to replace humans and to be able to offer the same or better when it comes to something like empathy or compassion. And I think that's a really important caveat up front. Human compassion is inherently emotional and experiential. It's being able to feel someone else's suffering and really wanting to take that away, almost like a mother lion who sees her cub in pain and wants to take that pain away. It is a complex cognitive process that involves empathy, moral reasoning, and a personal emotional response. And it's influenced by things like past experiences, cultural backgrounds, personal values, making it really nuanced to the person. Now, when it comes to AI, compassion is simulated. So we know it's based on data, it's based on algorithms, it's based on predefined rules. And we also know that AI can be programmed to recognize certain keywords, certain phrases, or even emotional cues in voice or text that can trigger what feels like a compassionate response. That said, AI still lacks the same level of genuine emotional experience and personal empathy, and that deep understanding that underpins human experience and compassion. So it's based on patterns and predictions rather than authentic feelings. And we'll definitely delve into this more over the course of the next hour and a bit, but I'll come out of the gate and say I'm definitely an advocate, and I come from the perspective of what incredible things can we do that weren't possibly available to us, and how does that change the game in terms of our accessibility for low or no cost support for people around the world that really need it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Thanks, thanks, Nicole. Maybe just picking up on a couple of things you both shared, and I'll start with you, Nicole. When we look at the data sets that are supporting AI, much of the global South is missing from that data set. The many of the people who are doing the coding are self-recognized as neurodiverse, We've got such a large swath of humanity that's missing from the development of the technology. And a piece of the conversation this week, we've got roughly 8 billion people on the planet. And the global narrative is that we as a species we can't help ourselves. We're a violent, cruel species. And the reality is, from a sociology, psychology, evolutionary perspective, we're hardwired for collaboration and cooperation. Well over 7 billion of us are living, for the most part, a very peaceful existence. Yet the mainstream media, which is creating the data set and the information that goes into AI, has a very different narrative. So when I look at the work that you're doing, for example, how are you bringing those other voices in? How are you ensuring that the AI that's being created is truly representative of the true nature of humanity?
I think the first step, again, I'm happy to go first here. I think the first step is just being aware and of the biases that are inherently in the AI right now, and any AI, and really always there will be biases in there, and that's why AI standing alone can't happen. It has to be a combination of humans and AI together. It is a process to get to a place where you take biases fully out of AI. I don't know if it really can ever happen. I don't think it can. And so it is having that humanity and AI working together to really have biases at the forefront of what we know is in there, so that we can constantly be mitigating against those. There's too much research out there of where AI has fallen short and has potentially hurt in choices for mortgages, things like that, that are can be a fault for humanity if we're not careful. So I think the first step is just recognizing and then making sure that's at the forefront of everything that we're doing. And knowing where the data is coming from is another piece. So with KindWorks, we actually do everything in-house. And, as we start to think about potential partnerships and APIs that we're bringing in, where that data is coming from is at the forefront of everything that we're doing.
And do you feel like you're alone, a lone party in that, or to what extent are the other, whether we're talking OpenAI or some of the other AI development organizations, to what extent are they attempting to do something similar?
I would like to believe, I can't say what's happening behind the walls at OpenAI, but I would like to think that they are thinking about this. And I do believe, they definitely have talked about that they are thinking about this and, putting processes in place and that. I think it's a combination. I think we were talking about, it is both the business's responsibility. There's also policies that we haven't figured out of how that works. And it's going to be a combination of both. And then also on the people that are using the AI to ask the questions as well. And, you want to know where the data is coming from, where your data is going. And so asking the questions is the other piece for the people that are using the AI.
What are your thoughts on how do we have a more inclusive and a more realistic representative AI, Dan?
Yeah, it's such an important question to really ground this conversation with at the outset. And Nicole, I think you spoke to that in a lot of really important ways. I'll just add the kind of perspective coming from the world of Ryzio and about 3 decades of clinical research and practical experience with one-on-one coaching and therapeutic work, as well as group therapy. It's so important that the data that we're pulling on is also not just looked at from cultural experience, lived experience, but Tom, you mentioned that a lot of the developers might self-identify as neurodiverse, and I think that that's an interesting tag you put out there. It's also well known that a lot of the data that we've been trained on is not data that is known to be clinically efficacious. And so, that's when you first have a question that goes up to, say, OpenAI or ChatGPT, it says, this information needs to be considered, that, this is not based on existing, scientifically evidenced information. Now, I think there's a lot that we can do to still really bridge those gaps beyond the data set that we just have to continue to try and improve and in every way possible. And there's a whole discussion that we could have on that topic alone. Where I would just add a little bit of a new light is one of the things that I am really personally excited about is that with some consumer education, we can help people understand when tools can be self-led in terms of asking for what it is that you need out of the experience. And I read that the average human, from the time that we're literate until the end of our life, if we read nonstop, we could read 40,000 books, whereas ChatGPT has already read over 100 million books. And when we consider that, the opportunity is staggering for us to pair human empathy, creativity, agency, and having it be a self-led experience with this partner that can bring this knowledge at their fingertips. The last thing I would note on the topic is there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom. And one of the things in my practice that has been so deeply nourishing and helpful has been learning from industry pioneers and community elders. And one of the things that I'm so excited and privileged to be working in this moment in time when we can shape the narrative and how compassionate AI comes forward is ensuring that some of that intergenerational and ancient wisdom is brought into the experience. And we can maybe dive more into that later, but thanks for the great question to get us started and ground this in reality.
Yeah, part of what I'm hearing from both of you, and I'll contrast it with our panelist on Tuesday was with us just back from Davos, and he shared that the sentiment and the mood in Davos, and these are some of the most influential, powerful people in the world, and the sentiment there was, let's keep spending the billions of dollars and moving AI forward. In the public sessions and then privately over dinner at night, there was a sense of doom and gloom, a sense that what we're bringing into the world is the destruction of humanity, and there was a sense of hopelessness. And so, what I'm hearing from both of you is a sense of optimism about the potential of AI. And I'm wondering if you both could speak to that a bit more.
Just about why we're optimistic, I think, is that the question?
Yeah, I mean, just what's your personal belief, your hope for the technology? Why should we come away from today's discussion feeling optimistic about AI and the potential that it holds as opposed to the threat that it poses?
Well, I think it's all about how we as humanity choose to use AI, and it's up to us. And I think there was a question earlier I saw in the chat about there's a question of, will it also be able to have greed, evil, and will for power? It's very similar to compassion and the empathy pieces. It's not going to have that innate gut, the wisdom and the feeling, but it will mimic the information that it has. I loved what Dan said about the difference of knowledge and wisdom, and the AI has the power to expand our knowledge so significantly. And then if we pair that with human wisdom in a positive sense, and I think there is a hunger from so many people. I mean, just the fact that this is a community that has grown so much, to have use AI for positive. So it's all about the inputs as humans that we put into the AI and the data, the way that we structure it. And so it's about the choices that we make as humans. And the more that we help each other, help the people in charge, our leaders especially, that are building AI, that are making decisions about AI, make choices that are positive, I very much believe that there's an optimistic future. Just as a very quick of how, so KindWorks.AI is a platform to encourage and enable the intentional practice of kindness. And the way that it was founded, actually, so our founder, CEO, he was the president of Oxford AI Society, and he had some news where he basically was at a very down moment in his life. He did a kindness for a total stranger, and it changed his perspective on his own well-being, his own next steps, his own life. And so he starts diving into the research on kindness. Simultaneously, he's the president of the Oxford AI Society. So he's seen the power of kindness and the power of AI, and he's, seeing all these use cases of AI that aren't necessarily helping people. How do you take the power of kindness and the power of AI? So the more, that's not the only use case. I mean, so many people, from Dan to all the people that you've had on here this week and that are connected through this community, there's so many use cases like that. And the more that we can use it in a positive sense, I mean, OpenAI has huge ability to help us as humans and make decisions and expand our knowledge. And if we pair that with the wisdom in a positive sense, I am very optimistic.
And how about for you, Dan?
Before I dive right in, I just want to echo something that really was resonant for me there about your story, Nicole, and about the story of your founder. I was always touched by the concept of the daymaker philosophy, just this simple notion that every day humans have the opportunity to make someone else's day, and we have no idea the ripple or impact that could have and what was happening, between their ears that day before you interacted. And I think it's a really cool idea to be bringing forth the combination of that and AI as a way to kind of have a virality effect, especially when so many of us now are so consumed and looking down at our phones. And I'll maybe circle back to it later, but for me, there's this interesting world that I live in between dogs who I grew up with and have taught me so much about mental wellness and engaging with humans as an icebreaker, and AI and the sort of difference between self and other in that regard. So I'll leave a teaser there and come back to the question. I do think that it's important to call out up front what Nicole referenced from the chat, which is one of the reasons that we're saying that this is a very exciting time to shape the narrative on what is possible with AI is because the reciprocal of that is also true. There is some genuine aspects to the threat that AI systems could pose a real threat for humans. And that personally isn't where I tend to focus my time and attention, because I am a believer that there is an overwhelmingly net positive opportunity here, and it's up to us to shape that. But just to sort of, even briefly underscore the time we're living in right now, a lot of academics and researchers and thought leaders will share with you that there's a very, very real threat, and they may word it differently, that one day AI systems will completely surpass human intelligence in every aspect. And given their greater ability to hold massive amounts of data and analyze that and process huge databases, that our limited human brains could fall far short of machines. Moreover, we need to sleep and eat and all of these other aspects. So, we have disease and we have emotional setbacks, which, by the way, I hope AI will help with, and we'll get there. So the question that we're really tackling is whether humans will be able to use AI systems for the betterment of humanity or be used by them. And it's, we can take the debate into a lot of different places, but that's in essence why we're here to talk about compassionate AI, to address the issues for creating solutions to some of the challenges that humanity is facing today, has been facing in the past, and will continue to face around, physically and mentally challenged people, reducing human pain and suffering and diseases, even stopping war and some of the comments that Jim was making earlier, preventing mass destruction of weapons, tackling terrorism. The list goes on and on. And I think the moment that we're in is one in which the more people that can hear this rallying cry to get involved, the better, because we're trying to, in essence, crowdsource and human label and human reinforce the data so that it's something that's more representative and leading us in the direction of more positive impact on society.
Yeah, and I'd love to get into the conversation around the use case, but before I do, just real quickly, for me, the AI developers, fundamentally, it always comes down to what is their business model. And if we look at Google, if we look at Facebook, if we look at the platforms that exist today for social media, it's all about advertising. It's all about eyeballs. We've seen it happen in the media, mainstream media here in the US. It's advertising based. And if we don't get the business, or if the AI developers don't get their business model, quote unquote, right, we're going to see the same aberrant behavior that we're seeing with Google and Google search, for example, where people are given the information that an algorithm determines they should be given the information to, or in social media, Facebook, how do we keep people on the platform as long as possible? And so if you both could just speak quickly to your thoughts about business models for AI, and then I'd love to transition the conversation into applications that are, supportive of humanity.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes a little bit to how do we define success as a population, and particularly how the media showcases success too. And I am a fan of how we redefine capitalism, because it's not going away. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. And also it needs to be rethought. What does success look like in business? And it's not just quarterly profits. It is, it is thinking about the people and all the stakeholders, from the people that are using the products to the people that are working on the products to the greater population of the world. And in social media, I think we see that more than anywhere, of just all of the downstream effects. And what does success look like in social media? And, social media is a hugely powerful tool for being able to connect people and help people in really powerful ways, similar to AI. And then obviously all of us have also seen it being used in ways that are not good for humanity. And I think that often goes back to the choices that people are making in every moment of every day, the choices that they're making in social media, the choices that they're making in their daily lives. So it's a very powerful tool. It's also one that, we need to redefine what success looks like for businesses.
Any thoughts from you, Dan, before we shift the conversation?
I think you nailed it, Nicole. The only thing I would add is just sometimes we can have a relatively short cultural history, and I think it's important to look back at the introduction of the internet and social media. And, what we see very clearly there is that the capitalistic motivations were and are around our human attention. And if you talk to a psychiatrist or a different professional, they'll let you know that when we're tired or we're stressed or anxious, the first thing to go is our attention. And so, I think that more and more people are waking up to the fact that a lot of the technology systems that we're ingrained in have been designed to really take our attention from us. And so Nicole spoke to the need for people to self-reinforce and to be aware of what you're engaging in. And it's no different with ChatGPT and AI. And I think a lot of there's a lot of education and there's a lot of agency that's going to be needed for us to not repeat the same patterns of the past.
Yeah, so picking up on that and just weaving in a few points, I'd love to talk about applications for AI in support and help, but we can't ignore that the world we're living in, we've lost about 40% of the democracies around the world. Here in the US, socialism has been demonized. So how do we ensure that the offerings that AI has to make available for people who can't afford mental health services, how do we make sure that what is being created and developed is accessible to people who need the services? And how do we ensure the quality of what's available?
Do you want to go first on this, Dan? I've gone first on them all.
Sure.
I'm happy to otherwise, but go ahead.
Sure. There's a lot to say on that topic from my perspective. Let's first talk about accessibility of care everywhere in the world. And I think at a certain level, that's the most exciting thing about this whole conversation. It's that no matter who you are or where you are, if you have an internet connected device, there is the opportunity to get a certain level of counsel in a way that is customized to your needs. So whereas the internet made everything available, AI is harnessing knowledge, and it's allowing people to be able to ask in a way that is beyond just a Google search, and have a conversation-based dialogue to refine collaboratively the specific piece of information that you need, regardless of whether that's to do with cooking dinner or the weather or parenting, personal, coaching, development, or something to do with your physical or your mental health. So I think my lived experience has been primarily in the Western world, and some of my views are focused there with respect to the opportunities that I'm working on at the moment. But I think the opportunities are broad, deep, and global. If I dive a little bit more into this theme around personalization, I would say that's probably the thing that's the second most exciting. It's, I grew up in a small family business, and I didn't know at the time, but my family business was quite unique. My family has a dog training business. I grew up with 10 to 18 dogs at any time. And the family business went on to train over 100,000 dogs in person and has now scaled to millions of people online. And what I studied without knowing it for most of my life was, how do you decouple? How do you separate specialized human instruction from the real-time nature of it, with the desire for humans to have customized, personalized learning and care? And I've looked at that from a number of different angles. And now I'm looking at that from what I think is one of the most impactful angles, which is, how do you get people the custom, personalized care that they need real time without continuing to amplify the real challenge we have with caregiver burnout? And what I think is so exciting is the opportunity for us to separate, on one hand, the personalization with the human, still be able to give that and have that come through AI, but then make sure we're not losing the human elements through other means, pairing that with a peer-to-peer community, pairing that with maybe a hybrid model with a coach or a therapist or a clinician, pairing that with the average person who has scored high on empathy, and allowing that container, kind of like Microsoft talks about Copilot, to have different pieces of the equation that people are needing addressed by those that are uniquely positioned to do so. I could go on and on and on, so I'll pause there and see what you think, Nicole.
Well, I completely build on everything that you said there. I think you said a lot of fantastic pieces. And one of the things too, just that idea of the caregivers, I think it's that using the knowledge to give them, like, I loved your reference to knowledge and wisdom. I think that's a really good way of showcasing AI and humanity and giving the caretakers more capacity to be able to do the things that only a human can do, because there are pieces of caretaking that you have to have a human, like many pieces with that, that humanity is so important. But if we can give them more capacity and reduce the burnout by taking some of these more administrative things that AI is able to do off of their plates, then they're able to, elevate their role in any situation. And it improves for the caregiver themselves, it improves for the patient, it improves for society, all of those pieces. And I mean, one of the other pieces, I think it also, Tom, you'd asked about, how do we kind of keep control of the use cases as well? I think, again, it goes back to what we talked about earlier. I think it's kind of a trifecta of we're all responsible for this. So the people that are leading the development of the AI and the businesses and the those people, and then also the policymakers, and putting regulations in place, but in a way that is working together with the people that are building the AI. And then it's our society as a whole to hold the people that are building accountable, to hold the policymakers accountable, and to ask questions. Again, this is a new frontier for everyone, and it's really on everyone to have a role in it, I believe. And then, I mean, I think the use cases they're really infinite, because it gives people more capacity to do the human tasks. And so like our platform of encouraging intentional kindness, when we launched it, we didn't really have a distinct audience for it. We have since, we want it to be, our vision is this is something for everyone, because it has so much potential. If people are practicing kindness, it has potential for your own well-being, for those around you. It can solve so many challenges for humans and for society. We are starting at workplaces, actually, kind of going back to the idea of what's business's role in this, and how do you kind of keep businesses accountable. But when people are practicing compassion and connecting, it elevates not only the person, it elevates the business as well for more long-term success, from more of those standard metrics that we're already measuring business on. But it also improves society, because we're humans, and we're not a different person at work than we are at home, as much as maybe history had tried to make it that way. We are one person, and the way that we're feeling and we're behaving and we're connecting with people at work is always going to translate into the way that we're thinking and feeling and behaving and making choices outside of work. And now that is happening so much on our phones and in social media and in places where we're not face to face with someone, it's so important that we're keeping compassion and kindness and humanity top of mind. And I think AI has the ability to help us keep it top of mind. It's so easy when things become really busy to just say, oh, I'm just going to shoot off this note to someone and not think about how they're going to feel at the other end of it. But if we are always thinking about that other person as a human being, there was actually a study that just came out recently that rudeness at the workplace has the biggest negative impact when it's done through email. So you can be rude to someone in person, that's not a positive impact. But when it's done through email, it has a much higher negative impact on that relationship that you have, and on the person's motivation and likelihood to continue to be motivated and happy in the workplace and in general.
Yeah, I'm particularly excited to hear that your focus on businesses, Nicole, and I would just ask both of you, can you give us some other positive use cases of AI, where it's being used and how it's being used, and the positive impact, as well as maybe speak to some of the limitations?
Sure. I mean, I just talked with, I get to talk with a lot of people in this space, which is really fun. I mean, one of the ones I talked with is another company called Empathic this week, that is really helping, particularly starting in healthcare, of how to communicate with people. So it gives you suggestions of, you can share, here's what I'm trying to say, and gives you very empathetic, compassionate ways to talk to people. And so that's one of the things, and there's so many use cases for that. I mean, we get asked sometimes of, oh, I'm going to write this email. Can Benny's the name of our AI agent, help me make it more compassionate? So that is a great use case if you can do that simply, of just like, read this and tell me, similar to Grammarly, but from a compassionate lens. And then, I mean, in the healthcare space in general, I think there's a lot of opportunities and ways that I'm seeing similar to that. I don't know, Dan, if you want to hit on a few.
Yeah, I absolutely do. Thank you. But I in effort to have a balanced conversation as well, I want to just give a really maybe 30 seconds of history that I think is important context right now. We are really talking about right now, why now? Why is this relevant right now? And bearing in mind, we've had a century of access to self-help books. So it's not just access. And we've had more than 60 years of access to machine learning, mental health related chatbots. Like, there was one called Eliza back in, I think, 1959 that first came out that could mimic and mirror a psychiatrist. We've had nearly 30 years of access, the average household access to internet, with online cognitive behavioral therapy and chat rooms and for support. We've had over a decade of smartphone mobile apps with mental health components, and a recent year proliferation of telehealth services, digital and real time. So taken together, it's not like access to resources alone is this panacea for prevention. I think that's important. We are humans, and there are lots of factors that can influence us not taking the steps that we need to live healthy, thriving lives. And so the major opportunity and the call to action for builders out there and clinicians and researchers, and this ecosystem approach in building things like Nicole has just mentioned, is to focus on preventative programs that don't replicate some of the learnings that we can pull on from what sort of has been tried and hasn't actually moved the needle or the dial to the degree that we want to. So when I look at that, and I really consider that, to me, we really want to look at and underscore what Nicole and I have been talking about around hybrid models, and knowing that humans are not robots, and we do need some hand-holding and some reinforcement. And sometimes it's the habit creation and the sort of, at Ryzio, we call it routines for rising. The ability to do embodiment practices and to live in your center doesn't necessarily help people to make that a priority. And so I think there's a framework called NAS to do with technical adoption and innovation in industries and healthcare. It stands for non-adoption, abandonment, scale up, spread, and sustainability issues. And so really looking at that context when we're designing, and looking at the need for education and training for both consumers and clinicians, and also the context of care. So the regulatory, the reimbursement, the clinical workflows, because gone is the era of being able to have siloed self-help, not connected apps. It just is not scalable, and it's not sustainable. And so I'm really excited for this new era where we're creating a standard where individuals own and take agency of their own mental and physical health journey. And that might look like having, your own access to data that you're able to bring from your clinician to your physiotherapist, to your mental health worker, to your dietitian, to your acupuncturist, or any number of ways in which you access mental health, because it may not be just working with professional services. And so taking this sort of ecosystem approach of recognizing that we've got, and Nicole touched on this, we've got patients, we've got clinicians, thinking about how to engage family members, thinking about how this is going to impact administration and regulatory, and working with AI developers. Really what we need is an ecosystem approach and this rising tide that can lift all ships as we take on this challenge. And if I were to close on, I think, the opportunity, it's really around personalized, real-time, hybrid models of effective care that don't repeat the things of the past and are allowing us to take the best from both types of consciousness and access to knowledge and wisdom that we can.
And maybe just building off of that, when I look at the ecosystem that exists today, and we have to be realistic about it, we have agencies here in the U.S. That are owned by industry. The convening that Senator Schumer held last year with leaders in AI was closed door, and we're seeing and have seen Silicon Valley companies that have followed the big tobacco playbook. And so we can't count on our regulators in Washington, D.C. here in the U.S. and other countries around the world to step up and do the job that needs to be done. We're not seeing industry figuring out what is their business model, sharing that, looking at how are they considering things like compassionate and ethical AI. And so that's just the reality that we're existing in right now. And granted, it's early days, but the technology is advancing very quickly. And so the stage of its development right now is more akin to AI, meaning access to information, or maybe augmented intelligence. But when we see the evolution to true artificial intelligence and the potential that it holds, there's that potential conflict of silicon beings in competition with carbon beings. And so I would just ask you both to just talk about not only the future that you envision and the future that you would like, but how do we ensure that we have the future that we want to have with the development of AI and however you define it. And Nicole, I'll start with you, just, given you're so close to the industry.
Absolutely. I'm going to go back to kind of the responsibility being on the people that are building it, the policymakers, and then society as a whole. And I think what you're talking about in here is the responsibility of society as a whole, which is clearly by far the largest effort that can come. And so what I would say is I encourage experiment and get your hands in and take a look at what's out there, and then question everything. I think that's the one piece of really question, and that's on everyone who's out there using. What is this for? How can we use this? Where is the data coming from? What's the goal of this? And, share your questions, in communities like this with the policymakers, with the people that are building it, but question everything. And don't just question the things you don't like to hear too, but literally question everything. Sometimes we hear things and we get in our own world and we're like, oh, that sounds like something that fits my beliefs. So I'm not going to question that. I literally mean question everything.
And how about for you, Dan?
I love that, Nicole. I think we should never outsource critical thinking, and that needs to be part of this conversation because it is all too easy in the busy, high demand, stressful world we often find ourselves in to just check out and ask Google. And now we can ask something even more powerful that can imitate our tone, and it can, um, you know, just be used in so many different creative ways. I think sometimes when we are looking at the future and what we want to see and change, it's helpful to also look to the youth. And so I wanted to take a moment to just give us a quick snippet at what's happening there. Many people that are listening may have kids that have already found their way to using these tools or be worried about it or be engaged in school conversations or university conversations about everything from plagiarism to the loss of critical thinking skills due to this access. OpenAI has a parental guidance required for 13 to, I think, 17 or 18 years old, and consider under 13 inappropriate users. That doesn't necessarily mean they aren't going to access it. But we've also seen a huge ban across schools and universities on using AI that, in my view, hasn't gone very well. And I don't think that would surprise a lot of people knowing how creative youth are at getting what it is that they want. For me, it was, Coles Notes and Spark Notes, and now it's a whole new game. So if we, I've done a lot of looking at where is mental wellness happening in the world that is sort of not as obvious. Places like TikTok or Twitch, young people opening up in first person about their mental health while streaming video games. Areas like this that we need to be mindful of, not just the traditional means. And if we take a look at the way in which it's being used by youth, I saw a really interesting, I think yesterday, there was a TechCrunch article about OpenAI's new team to study child safety. And they have a couple of different partnerships with educational institutions that they're working to make, AI friendly youth guidelines. And there was a particular study by the Center for Democracy and Technology that polled a whole bunch of youth and found that almost 30% of kids using ChatGPT have used it for managing or serving their anxiety and mental health needs. Almost 30% of kids have already used it for that purpose. In addition, I think almost 25% have used it for issues with friends, and 16% for issues at home with family. So the tool, like I kind of said earlier, the cat's out of the bag. It's going to be used, it is being used, and there's so much potential for us to look at this strategically and really enhance and support new ways of caring and healing.
Yeah, thank you both. I'd like to invite Jim back into the conversation, and anything that's there for you, Jim, to follow as we start to bring the show to a conclusion.
Well, I'm still taking in, Dan, that your family has done gazillions of dogs. That's impressive.
I was raised by wolves.
I think my first question is what did you learn about compassion and emotional intelligence dealing with the canines? Because they're, dogs are called, man's best friend. And I would love to, because we normally think of these emotions as in a very human-centric way. But I think your experience opens up something that is worth exploring, and that is, the extent to which animals have compassion and what humans can learn from animals about compassion.
Yeah. Thank you for picking up on that little teaser. I wasn't sure we had time to necessarily go into that. And as you could probably guess, I could talk about it for quite some time. Animal training runs back several generations in my family lineage, and I had such a fortunate childhood, which of course I didn't realize at the time, to grow up in the country surrounded by animals and dogs. And I recognize sort of dogs as love language in my family in exactly the way you're talking about. I learned to express love in a nonverbal way and to understand energy and dynamics in a nonverbal way. And so I kind of scratch my head and chuckle as I'm going further and further into this realm of human consciousness versus other being AI, and looking at my kind of polls with considering my intimate experience spending time with dogs. And I really believe in the empathy that animals and dogs, there's lots of research on equine therapy with horses as well. And so there's all kinds of research that exists out there about the mental wellness benefits on both ends of the leash, so to speak. And it's everything from cardiovascular health, from getting out and walking in nature, to that incredible, great, good enough moment that some of us know, arriving home with a pet wagging their tail and greeting us at the door. And that aspect that we kind of are, in the context of this conversation, have been calling only human, the ability to have a heart-based connection with another living thing is incredibly healing. And when I think about some of the really important points that was raised in the panel today about these innately human aspects that we cannot and should not replace, it's really around things like that empathy and being really aware of not losing those time-tested human values and aspects. And I would say beyond empathy, there's trust. And the role that trust plays between two people, whether they're friends, family members, a clinician and a patient, or an animal and a human, is paramount to the healing process. Trust breeds way to safety, and without safety, we don't really have a container for healing. And so I guess the way that I would summarize my views in the space is looking collectively at what we have access to and working to personalize a care strategy. So, there's a long-term memory challenge with AI right now, but getting past that, having a relationship, so to speak, with your AI, that they know that I have two dogs, and that's part of my daily routine, and that can be brought into it. There are so many creative ways for us to think about decoupling this sort of very traditional approach to care. And it would look different for you, Jim, than for me, than Nicole, than Tom, or other generations. And I think through that lens, it's not just looking at dogs. It's really, and I think going to artists and going to a broad swath of the population to explore this topic. What does it mean to be human? And in which ways can we support our healing journey as we each take a step on our own path and we're supported by those around us?
Yeah, beautifully put. Beautifully put. Nicole, do you have anything to add? And Tom, I know you're dealing with animals all the time as you go from one house to another through your network. Just any comments? I think it's a rich vein.
No, I mean, I think there were some comments in the chat as well. It's just that innate piece from animals, that, they feel you. And it's a good example of what AI can't do, is that connection, that you have with each other.
Good. Tom?
Yeah, I think for me, there's the piece that Dan spoke to around trust. And we can't, trust is the gateway to feeling safe. And, when we feel safe, it's a function of being seen, being heard, and being appreciated. And, dogs in particular, any animals, don't have an agenda. They immediately see us, they hear us, they appreciate us. And so we feel safe with them. But, I'll take it to a broader context of relationship. And in relationship, there's the opportunity to heal each other's wounds from life's journey. There's the opportunity to grow each other up. And there's the opportunity to be our highest and best self. And AI, at least at this point, doesn't have the ability to let us heal those wounds, to grow ourselves up, to be our highest and best selves. Animals, dogs in particular, can be wonderful companions on that journey. But I think that's one of the getting to your question, Dan, what does it mean to be human? That's getting close to the importance of the relationship dimension of being human that AI, at least at this point, hasn't addressed.
Yeah.
I'll just share, when I left Anheuser-Busch in my farewell email, I actually wrote it based on the qualities that I've learned from my dog. I just pulled it up: be confident, be persistent, be resilient, be caring, be happy. Like, these are things that AI, and there's a lot more to the email, but these are things that, you can learn from animals and from each other, but it's that light.
Yeah, good.
And I'm just scanning through the lovely comments here, and so many different experiences are coming up. And I would just add two last thoughts from my side. One, there's the real tactile nature that AI I don't see as a near-term component, where you can get that from humans or from dogs or from animals, and having that is so important for our nervous systems. And I personally, looking at neuroscience and polyvagal theory, looking at ways in which advances in technology may be able to bridge the gap for accessibility, with having, being able to pass what we call the uncanny valley with human likeness in terms of simulated humans, so that we can not just have conversational voice AI, but that we can have simulated human essence that can make you feel seen and provide eye contact, which we know in childbirth and in youth, that relationship with eye contact grows and myelinates the vagus nerve and helps us feel safe in our nervous systems. So there's so much there. I dropped a link on a little bit more on that. And I think that the last kind of point, I just love that we have this incredible chat happening here and the opportunity to go a little bit deeper afterwards on Zoom, because the organization that I'm leading right now, called Ryzio Institute, it comes from a background in group therapy and this knowledge, in this appreciation and understanding of the collective wisdom. And that, in essence, is what we're trying to figure out how to bring forth to AI. And so it's so important that people get engaged, and now is the time. AI has been around for 70 years, and yet right now it's really the time to get involved in helping shape this narrative.
Beautiful, beautiful. Then, Nicole, I was struck, on listening to you, by your observation about emails, because it's really true. When I look back over the last 10 years, probably the biggest mistakes I've made was pushing the send button on an email written in a state of either hurry or impatience, anger, frustration, you're right. There's something about emails. There's something about when, we shift from dogs, which is so organic, to machines,
Yep.
which are inorganic, but we're trying to express the organic part of ourselves in an artificial way that, there's something lost in translation.
Yep. And it causes lots of challenges between
Yeah.
both in the workplace and outside. It actually goes a little bit to something I put in the chat that I wanted to underline, because I'm talking about that idea of question everything. That idea of doing it, though, it has to be with empathy. And I think about it with bringing positive intent for yourself, and also assuming positive intent on the other person. Most of the time, if you receive an email that strikes you the wrong way, that you're, offended by, it was not actually the other person trying to offend you, but it's really, Jim, what you just said of like, they were in a rush, they weren't thinking, they just did it without thinking. And so if you on the receiving end assume positive intent, but question it, then it actually repairs that relationship.
Very good point.
For moving forward.
Yeah, you question even yourself.
Yeah.
In fact, most of all.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good admonition. That's back to Socrates. Question everything, he said. Everything. And that's the pathway to illumination. We're just coming to the end of time, but I want to bring in Shannon MacArthur's question to both of you. If you asked an AI, what is your purpose? What would the AI say?
Nicole, you go first, and I'll ask the AI.
Oh, you're really putting me on the spot then.
Somebody get
No
on
time.
GPT chat.
Yes.
Your-
I should have it open right now, and I don't.
I have, of course. My purpose is to assist users by providing information, answering questions, generating creative content, and performing various tasks, text-based interactions. I'm designed to help with a wide range of topics, including but not limited to general knowledge, education, technical support, creative writing, and more, aiming to be as accurate, informative, and helpful as possible within the constraint of my design and training data. So that's the modern
There
web
you go, Shannon.
web series. But Nicole, how would you answer it? And then I will too, because that's there's a lot of legalese in that if we read between the lines.
Yes, and also I think that hits on. I mean, it's the first word was to assist, and I was going to say to help, to assist, to whatever that word is, by helping you grow your knowledge and your skill sets, and which is generally what that long legalese was about. But again, kind of going to that idea of AI is here to expand your knowledge and your ability to do more new skills, more skills. So I think that it hits on what I would have said, but in a much more expanded way.
Yeah.
I love underscoring the assist, because with the new compassionate AI product that I'm building for care in between therapy and in between retreat or workshops, the only prompt I give people before they play with the prototype is, remember that this is self-led. And I think what is really cool about the word assist is the agency is still in the driver's seat of the human. And so another way to look at this, a bit meta maybe, could be, what is your purpose, Shannon? And how can you influence the AI to assist you with that purpose? And when I was thinking back, or I was thinking last night at yoga, of this question that Tom's prompted us with, what does it mean to be human? And I thought, oh my goodness, the ways in which we could approach that question. For me, it comes kind of down to this question, like, what is your purpose? And at a certain level, for me, I think it's about creating. I think it's about making. I think it's about making meaning. I think humans are meaning-making creatures. It's maybe about making dinner. It's about making art. It's about making peace with the ephemeral nature of our existence, and the fact that, our time here is temporary, unlike AI. And I think that for me, although I am rooted quite and have been most of my life in sort of the business and science ways of thinking, in the last many years, I've had the gift of having my creative expression opened with different influences. And I think one of the major ways I think about what is my purpose to make, if we just focus on one of the more uplifting ones, to make art, to impact other people, we're seeing already the way in which AI can assist with creative brainstorming. And it can just totally change the way in which you can do whatever it is that you're looking to do. So yeah, lots that could be said there. I'd love to hear Nicole or Jim or Tom, anything on
Well, why
that.
don't you comment, and then Tom will wrap it up.
Well, no, I think, Dan, that idea of purpose, I mean, we talk about that all the time at KindWorks, and I think about it all the time. And I always think about, like, I want to help people be happy. And I always wanted to do that. And I was like, somehow I am a happy person. And when I started diving into the research on kindness, I was like, this is a big reason that I am happy. How do I help other people be happy in life? And so that's part of it. I think just this idea of soul too, of like that ability to connect on a human level. So obviously I have my role at KindWorks. I'm also a mom of two young boys, and that idea of, putting them out into the world to be, also happy, soulful people. And like, what is human? I mean, one of the just most obvious things that makes me think like the AI can never do is this idea of cuddling with my kids. And like that form of connection is something that just doesn't happen in AI, and it never will.
Wow.
That's a very strong statement, Nicole. It will never happen with AI, and it never will.
It is a strong statement, but I strongly believe you cannot, I can't get that feeling that I get when I cuddle with my boys through technology.
AI can't hug your kids. Tom, how would you wrap this up and then tee us up for tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean, I always go back to, and I've shared this on prior broadcasts, I always go back to S. Warren's English translation of the Gita, where he says the opportunity of life is to serve, to give, to love. And I would add a fourth, which is to create. And that's my touchstone. I always go back to as a human being. Where am I being of service? Where am I giving? Am I an expression of love? And where am I creating? And it's just that's the opportunity of life. We can call it our purpose. We can call it whatever we want. We can define how and where we spend our time and our talents and our treasure. But it's how do we live into each of those four opportunities that life presents?
Good. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Nicole. This has been a very rich session today. And that'll bring us to a close. You're all welcome to the after session chat. You'll see the link in the chat box, and you received it in your Zoom invite. Dan and Nicole are going to join the after chat, so this will give you a chance for an expanded conversation. And then we'll see you all again tomorrow for our fifth and final session on public policy with artificial intelligence. Thank you so much, Tom.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Nicole. Bye, everyone. See you tomorrow.